Have you ever felt it? That subtle, almost imperceptible hum beneath the surface of reality. A deep and unsettling frequency suggesting that the rules of the game you're playing were written by someone else, for someone else? What if I told you that this whisper in your soul is not a fleeting doubt, but the first sign of a profound awakening? That everything you've been meticulously taught about power, about the sacred dance between man and woman, about your very destiny, is part of a grand, masterfully constructed illusion? The most significant war ever waged is not recorded in the annals of history with tales of clashing armies and falling empires. It is a silent, invisible war, a spiritual conflict fought not on battlefields of soil and stone, but in the sacred chambers of the heart, within the walls of our homes, and woven into the very fabric of our civilization. This is the eternal struggle for energetic dominance, a cosmic chess match between the raw, direct force of the masculine and the subtle, pervasive influence of the feminine. Today, we shatter the looking glass. We will unearth the forbidden teachings that Niccolò Machiavelli understood in his very bones, secrets of power so potent they were intentionally obscured, lest they disrupt the carefully balanced matrix of control. This is not just information, it is an activation. For when you grasp these truths, your perception will shift, your frequency will rise, and you will begin to see the world through a lens of absolute clarity. If this message already strikes a chord deep within you, if you feel that vibration of recognition, honor it. Like this video, subscribe to continue your journey of awakening, and affirm your path by typing "I am awake" or 777 in the comments below. Let the universe know you are ready to see. Let us begin with a foundational truth, a universal law that governs the flow of all power. Men rise from one ambition to another. First, they seek to secure themselves from attack, and then they attack others. These are the words of Machiavelli, a man who saw the world not as it ought to be, but as it is. He understood the fundamental masculine impulse, the drive to build, to secure, to establish a fortress, and from that place of security, to expand, to conquer, to project power outward. This is the energy of the sun, direct, radiant, and overt. Yet, what Machiavelli whispered only in his most private letters, what he understood from observing the most powerful courts of his time, was that there exists another form of power, a different frequency altogether. It is the power of the moon, reflective, magnetic, and indirect. It does not need to build a fortress, for it operates from within the fortresses others have built. It does not need to attack openly, for its influence is a current that redirects the flow of the entire river. This is the veiled power, the current that has silently shaped civilizations while the masculine energy was busy fighting its overt wars. Picture this, if you will. Florence, 1502, the heart of the Renaissance, a crucible of masculine, genius, and ambition. In a lavish chamber, surrounded by the most powerful poets, artists, and politicians in all of Italy, sits a noblewoman, Isabella de' Medici. On the surface, she is the perfect embodiment of the Renaissance lady, a vision of grace, culture, and demure submission. Her words are soft, her gestures refined, her presence a calming balm to the fiery egos that surround her. But feel her frequency, look beyond the veil. Behind closed doors, within the silent chambers of her mind, Isabella is the true architect of power. She does not command armies. She whispers a single, carefully chosen word into the ear of a general, a word that changes the course of a war. She does not challenge a rival banker in the open market. She cultivates a rumor, a subtle insinuation that unravels his financial empire from within. She does not need a sword to destroy a man. She uses his own pride, his own desires, his own masculine drive as the very weapons of his undoing. Her greatest weapon, the one most men fail to perceive until it is far too late, is the masterfully crafted illusion of her own weakness. She allows them to feel like the sun, all-powerful and central, while she, like the moon, silently controls the tides of their emotions, their ambitions, and their fates. This is the dark truth that Machiavelli knew. In his seminal work, The Prince, he famously wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." Men have interpreted this for centuries as a call for brute force, for intimidation through overt displays of strength. But they missed the deeper, more subtle wisdom, the wisdom that women have intuitively understood for millennia. The fear Machiavelli spoke of is not the terror of a tyrant's axe. It is the profound and unsettling respect that comes from facing an opponent whose true power you cannot see, whose next move you cannot predict. It is the fear of the unknown. While kings and conquerors swung their swords and shouted their orders, queens, courtesans, and noblewomen were mastering this higher form of power. They ruled not through steel, but through subtler, deadlier means: influence, seduction, and the divine art of appearing harmless until the trap was already sprung. They understood that you do not need to break down the castle gates if you can persuade the king to hand you the keys himself. They did not fight the battle. They reshaped the battlefield itself, creating a terrain where their unique strengths would inevitably lead to victory. This is the first key to your awakening. You must understand that the power that has been used against you does not look like your power. It does not operate on the same frequency. It is the patient, persistent power of water that wears away the strongest stone, not with a single blow, but with a relentless, gentle touch over time. To fight it with brute force is to punch the ocean. You will only exhaust yourself while the tide continues to rise. Here's the brutal truth, the one that will rewire your understanding of history and, more importantly, of your own life. Female power does not operate like male power. It is not confrontational. It is subversive. It is not direct. It is systemic. And that is precisely why most men are completely blind to its influence until they are already ensnared in its web. Let me hit you with a story so shocking it will rewrite your very understanding of history. Journey with me to 17th century France, to the opulent and treacherous court of the Sun King, Louis XIV. Here, we find a woman named Madame de Montespan. To the world, she was the official mistress of the most powerful man in Europe. But in reality, she was the shadow empress. She did not merely share the king's bed. She controlled his empire from within it. When a younger, more beautiful rival threatened her position, Madame de Montespan did not challenge her openly. That would be the masculine way, a direct confrontation of power. Instead, she descended into the esoteric, the unseen realms of influence. She hired a witch to perform black masses, allegedly sacrificing infants in dark rituals designed to bind the king's heart to hers and curse her rival. This was not just a petty squabble. It was a spiritual war fought with the darkest of energies. When the plot, known as the Affair of the Poisons, was eventually uncovered, it sent shockwaves through the entire French aristocracy. Yet, King Louis, the Sun King, the man with absolute authority, could not bring himself to execute her. Why? Because her power over him was not merely physical or political. It was profoundly psychological. She had spent years making herself indispensable to him, weaving herself into the very fabric of his emotional and psychological reality. She had become his addiction, his necessary poison. To remove her would have been to unravel himself. This is the essence of this veiled power strategy. It does not seek to defeat you. It seeks to make you need it for your very survival. Machiavelli wrote, "He who believes that new benefits will cause great personages to forget old injuries is deceived." Women have mastered the inverse of this principle for millennia. They understand that by becoming the source of a man's greatest benefits, his emotional validation, his sense of purpose, his peace, they can make him forget any injury, forgive any transgression, and surrender any amount of his own power. A man thinks with his pride, his ego, his sense of transactional logic, He sees the world in terms of battles to be won and deals to be made. A woman plays the long game. She is the master architect of dependency. She makes you need her, and then she owns you. You have seen this play out in your own life. Perhaps you have even lived it. It is the girlfriend who positions herself as your greatest supporter, the one who just wants to help, until you realize she has slowly, methodically isolated you from your friends, drained your bank account, and become the sole gatekeeper of your happiness. It is the wife who claims to not understand the complexities of finance or politics. Yet somehow, through a constant stream of emotional appeals and subtle manipulations, dictates every major decision your family makes. It is the female coworker who plays the role of the innocent, wide-eyed novice, all while subtly sabotaging your projects and positioning herself to take credit for your work. They have mastered the art of leveraging the masculine instinct to protect and provide, turning it into a tool for their own ascent. Machiavelli warned, "The wise man does at once what the fool does." Finally, in this silent war, most men are fools. They operate under the delusion that power is something that is taken by force, that the game is played out in the open. They assume that if no one is shouting, no one is fighting. But real power, the kind that endures, is not seized. It is cultivated. It is taken through patience, through strategy, and through the masterful art of letting your enemy perpetually underestimate you until the checkmate is already inevitable. Think of Catherine the Great. She arrived in Russia as a minor German princess, ignored, belittled, and dismissed by a court that saw her as nothing more than a political pawn. She did not rage or rebel. She watched. She learned. She waited. She cultivated allies not by demanding loyalty, but by making herself the most intelligent, charming, and capable person at court. She embodied the Russian spirit more than the Russians themselves. By the time her foolish husband, the Tsar, finally recognized the depth of her ambition, it was far too late. She had already won the loyalty of the army, the adoration of the nobility, and the hearts of the people. His fate was sealed. He was overthrown, murdered, and history remembers her as Catherine the Great, the legend, while he is but a footnote. Her victory was not won on the day of the coup. It was won in the thousands of quiet, patient days that preceded it. Here is where the truth becomes darker still. This is not just about the strategic brilliance of individual women. What if I told you that this feminine frequency of power, this silent, systemic approach, has been so successful that it has reshaped the entire structure of our society? What if the very systems we live in have been subtly weaponized against the masculine principle? This is the silent coup. History, as they say, is written by the victors. But what happens when the victors never needed to raise a sword to win? What if the most devastating conquests in human history were not military, but social? What if they took place not on battlefields, but in bedrooms, in courtrooms, and within the unspoken rules of our culture? Machiavelli knew the truth. Power isn't just seized, it is engineered. And for centuries, while men were busy building empires, fighting wars, and conquering nations, women were quietly reshaping the very foundation of civilization itself. Consider the case of Empress Theodora of Byzantium. Born a circus performer and prostitute, she was from the lowest rung of society. Yet, she clawed her way from the gutters to the throne, becoming the co-ruler of the Byzantine Empire alongside her husband, Emperor Justinian. While Justinian was drafting laws of conquest and waging wars, Theodora was rewriting the empire's social codes. She passed sweeping, revolutionary reforms granting women the right to own property, the right to inherit wealth, and the right to divorce abusive husbands. These were concepts that would not be seriously considered in the West for another 1,000 years. The men of Byzantium, the powerful generals and senators, never saw it coming. They were too busy with their overt games of power, their debates of theology, and their crushing of rebellions. By the time they realized what had happened, Theodora's laws had already fundamentally redefined the power dynamics of their civilization for generations to come. She did not overthrow the patriarchy with force. She performed a silent coup, changing the rules of the game so subtly that the other players didn't even notice until the match was already over. This is the ultimate expression of Machiavellian strategy. The innovator, he wrote, has for enemies all those who have done well under the old order of things, and lukewarm defenders in those who may do well under the new. The system was re-engineered, and a new matrix of power was born. Now, fast forward to today. The modern legal system, the family courts, the alimony statutes, the very concept of community property. These things did not materialize out of thin air. They are the modern legacy of Theodora's revolution. They were architected slowly, deliberately, over generations, by those who understood that legal systems are the ultimate form of leverage. A man might win a physical battle, but if the legal and social system is fundamentally rigged against him, he loses the war by default. He becomes a slave to a system that was designed to extract his resources, his energy, and his very life force. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and yield so readily to the wants of the moment that he who will trick will always find another who will suffer to be tricked." The modern systems are the ultimate trick. The divorce rate, the child custody statistics that overwhelmingly favor the mother, the rise of concepts like emotional labor as a cultural bargaining chip, these are not accidents. They are the calculated culmination of centuries of silent, strategic maneuvering. And here is the most uncomfortable truth of all. Men do not rule the world. They are allowed to believe they do, so long as they continue to generate the resources that fuel the system. Consider Wu Zetian, the only female emperor in the entire history of China. She began her journey as a low-ranking concubine in the emperor's harem. By the time she was done, she had outmaneuvered every rival, rewritten history in her favor, and ruled the most powerful nation on earth with an iron fist. How? She mastered the divine art of perception management. The powerful Confucian scholars of her court, whose entire ideology was built on female submission, were faced with a reality they could not deny. So what did they do? They scrambled to justify her reign. They painted her as a divine exception, a heavenly anomaly, a once-in-a-millennium event, all to preserve the integrity of their own belief systems. But Wu knew the truth. Power isn't about titles or ideologies. It's about who controls the story. Now, look at modern media, at Hollywood, at our education systems. The narrative is clear and relentless. Men are the oppressors, women are the victims. Masculinity is toxic, femininity is sacred. Behind the scenes of this narrative, women dominate the key institutions that shape culture: education, publishing, human resources departments, and, most critically, the family courts. They are the gatekeepers of the story we tell ourselves about who we are. They shape the laws we obey, the social norms we internalize, and the very thoughts in our children's heads. This is the Machiavellian playbook. And now, it is time for you to learn how to write your own. The chessboard is set. The pieces are moving against you. But knowledge without action is the luxury of philosophers, not kings. This is where we transition from understanding the game to mastering it. The path will not be clean. It will not be fair. But for the man willing to embrace these truths, it leads to a form of power that can never be taken from you. This is the ruthless Renaissance. The first pillar of this new dominance is absolute economic sovereignty. Machiavelli warned that dependence creates slaves, and nowhere is this more evident than in the modern family court system. A man's productivity is systematically transferred to female control. The solution? Structure your assets like the Medici structured their political influence through layers of protection that make extraction impossible. Offshore trusts, intellectual property holdings, decentralized assets, equity structures that vest over decades. These are not just financial tools. They are the armor of the modern warrior. You must build a financial fortress so impregnable that you are immune to the systemic traps laid for you. But wealth alone is meaningless without social dominance. This is the second pillar. Here we turn to the example of Augustus Caesar, who transformed Rome from a republic to an empire, all while maintaining the illusion of tradition. When women control the cultural narrative, direct confrontation is suicide. The solution is infiltration and subversion. Take the tech industry. While diversity quotas dominate public hiring, the most powerful men have quietly built parallel networks of influence. Venture capital firms may preach woke ideology publicly, but their investment decisions still favor ruthless competence. This is the key. Master this duality. Publicly applaud the system while privately building your own. Sponsor women who are loyal to you, not to the ideology. Promote diversity initiatives that coincidentally benefit your protégés. Like Augustus keeping the Senate while controlling the army, you maintain appearances while holding the real power. The third pillar is perhaps the most controversial and the most crucial: the strategic use of relationships. Most men fall into two traps. Either they pedestalize women, sacrificing their power for female approval, or they retreat into bitter isolation. The master of this new renaissance does neither. He follows the example of Louis XIV, the Sun King, who maintained a harem of mistresses at Versailles while allowing none to influence his policy. His famous morning and evening rituals, the lever and coucher, were not just ceremonies. They were psychological operations that kept courtiers perpetually competing for his attention. The modern application? Date widely, but commit rarely. Use the abundance provided by modern apps to your advantage. They are not for finding a wife. They are for maintaining a rotation that keeps you emotionally detached and socially validated. When a woman realizes she is competing not just with other women, but with your mission, your purpose, your very destiny, her entire frame of manipulation collapses. Your standards become non-negotiable. The fourth pillar is the fusion of physical and psychological dominance. Machiavelli observed that a prince must be both lion and fox. Today's equivalent is the combination of elite physical fitness and unshakable stoic discipline. Look at Vladimir Putin's judo black belt and his ice-cold public persona. Whether you respect him or not, his image projects invulnerability. Your training regimen isn't about health, it's about signaling unstoppable capability. Your emotional control isn't maturity, it is strategic opacity. When you combine a physique that commands instinctive respect with a demeanor that reveals nothing, you create what the ancient Spartans called the fear without the hatred, the sweet spot of intimidation that keeps enemies cautious without making you a target. The Machiavellian man does not argue with a woman who weaponizes tears. He mirrors her distress with such calm sincerity that she is disarmed and forced to engage on his terms. He doesn't beg for fairness in a rigged system. He exploits its loopholes with cold precision. The final pillar is legacy building, the ultimate checkmate. The feminist movement didn't win by being right. It won by being patient. They planted ideological seeds in one generation that bore fruit in the next. The modern man must think similarly, long-term. Start media companies that shape masculine narratives. Invest in technologies that redefine power structures. Mentor young men who will carry your influence forward. The Rothschilds didn't just accumulate wealth. They built an intergenerational system of influence that outlasted empires. Your goal isn't just personal success, but the creation of structures that perpetuate masculine authority in a world increasingly hostile to it. This is the Renaissance we must engineer, not a return to some imagined past, but the creation of a future where male power is so deeply embedded in the system that any attempt to dismantle it only strengthens its hold. The strategies outlined here won't just protect you from the current social order, they will position you to reshape that order in your image. The war between the sexes will not be won with complaints or debates, but through the quiet, relentless accumulation of unassailable power across every domain that matters. The question is not whether you are willing to play the game. The game is already being played on you. The only choice is whether you will master it or remain its pawn. The path to power is never smooth, never fair, and never handed to you. It is seized by those willing to see the world as it truly is and to act without apology. Machiavelli's greatest lesson wasn't about cruelty, it was about clarity. The choice before you is simple. Will you remain trapped in a system designed to drain you, or will you become the architect of your own destiny? The game is rigged. The question is, will you learn to rig it in your favor? If you are ready to embrace the ruthless mindset required to win, type lion in the comments below.